And we continue our coverage here from the winter meetings in Las Vegas. Steve Melewski with Jonathan Mayo from MLBpipeline.com. John has worked for many years with our good friend Jim Callis. Of course, they do an incredible job covering the minor leagues, prospects, the draft, anything to do with young players. You guys are all over it. And guess what, Jonathan? In Baltimore right now, they're focusing on young players. So it's a great time to catch up with you guys. And you have some history of knowledge of Mike Elias. What are your thoughts on his hire in Baltimore?
I think it's a great hire. Obviously, you see the success the Astros have had in terms of what the Orioles now need to do in terms of rebuilding from within through the draft, hopefully through international free agency, things of that nature. And you know, I've talked with Mike a bunch over the years when he was scouting director, and then even when he got sort of bumped up from that. And I think that he brings a really good mix of the sort of, we'll use new age, although it's not really new age anymore, the sort of analytics approach. But he also had to go out and scout and do the old-fashioned eye test kind of thing. So, and to me, the teams that do it the best use a hybrid approach. You can't just do one or the other. And I think Mike, because he's had all these different experiences, brings that breadth of knowledge with him to Baltimore, and a lot of youthful energy also.
I think it's a great point you made about his scouting background. That's where he started. He started as an area scout. This guy has sat in small minor league ballparks holding up a radar gun, making notes, taking video, all the things that scouts do at the regional level, and that is the kind of the framework for everything he's done. So while he has all the analytics and all the data, he's also got that scout background.
Right, and he also saw what Jeff Luhnow did in Houston, or continues to do, which is surround himself with smart people. Right, so no one general manager can do everything all by himself. The second that happens, I think they run into trouble. So there's a lot on his plate. I know he's got to find a scouting director and a farm director and a lot of that ancillary staff. But I think he's going to go and do it the right way. He's not going to rush out and just hire people because there are spots to fill. He's going to find the right people for those jobs and help Baltimore kind of reclaim their spot in what is always annually a really competitive division.
Jonathan Mayo with us from MLBpipeline.com. Before we get into some specific names, and of course the Orioles have the #1 pick in the June draft, which is going to be incredibly important for the franchise. How has data, analytics, some of the things that we're hearing about the major league level, has that made its way to the amateur level? Is it impacting how teams draft?
Oh, without question. I don't think that it's gone sort of full on. I hate using the word Moneyball because that's an oversimplification of what it is, but you know, no one's gone full on that way, although some teams did and then kind of had to retrace their steps a little bit. But I think the combination of being able to get a lot of that data in college baseball, there's more of it still in college game. But what's happening more and more, there are more high-level high school showcases. I think Major League Baseball and USA Baseball have worked together to create more and more events that are kind of controlled by scouts. You have things like the East Coast Pro Showcase. So there's a lot more data collected, mostly over the summer. And those kinds of events. So now they're even getting some of that information for high school players. Still not as much because you can't go out to some rural high school in Georgia and hook up, you know, TrackMan or something like that. But a lot of it exists, again, against really high-level pitching, pitchers facing high-level hitters. So there's more information to go from as they create their follow lists for the spring.
All right, let's talk about the #1 pick the Orioles will make on June 4th, I believe, is the first round. Adley Rutschman, I believe is how you pronounce it, the Oregon State catcher. Bobby Witt Jr., the high school shortstop out of Texas. Those are the two names that we keep hearing. You guys at MLBpipeline.com just put out your latest top 50. You have Rutschman first, Witt Jr. second. Is there a gulf after the top two? Is it the top two, or are there some others close to them?
I think the only player who's close is Andrew Vaughn from Cal, the first baseman, and he's #3 on our list. The only separator, really, I think, is because he's a first baseman only, and Witt is a long-term shortstop, and Rutschman is definitely a catcher, playing premier positions, premium positions. I think that is the main difference that you'll find. But Vaughn was such a good hitter. If he replicates what he did in winning the Golden Spikes Award, his name is going to pop up in those top couple of spot conversations because he's a guy who's going to be really, really quick to the big leagues.
Okay. So if the draft were tomorrow, who do you think the Orioles should take with the #1 pick?
I think you could make a case for either one of those two guys. I would probably take Adley Rutschman only because he's a little bit more advanced. And if you have a franchise player behind the plate, that can make a huge difference. I hate to make the Matt Wieters comps. They're not necessarily the same player. Rutschman might have a better bat, actually. But you saw what Wieters did in terms of solidifying the team and how quickly he got to the big leagues and what he meant to the franchise. I think the same thing could be said for Rutschman, and he is the real deal. So often college catchers, if they can field, they don't hit, or if they hit, they're going to have to move out from behind the plate. He's going to stay behind the plate. He is a really well-rounded backstop who will hit for average and power at the next level.
So how do you weigh, again, if you're the Orioles making this pick, you're rebuilding, you lost 115 games, you're in it for the long haul now with the new management. How do you weigh a high school talent and a college talent? You have Richmond College, Witt High School.
Right. Well, that's why I'm glad I'm not the one signing the checks, right? So it is a tough call. And I think that if in their evaluations they think Bobby Witt has a chance to be a generational kind of player, once in a lifetime, then they should go that route. The big mistake you can make, I think, is, especially if you're a new general manager coming in and you need to almost start over, you want to make sure you get that pick right, but you also don't want to be quote-unquote safe. I think the good thing, if you're Mike Elias in this year's draft or whoever the scouting director ends up being, is that Adley Rutschman is a college player, but he's not like a safe, oh yes, he's going to get to the big leagues and be an okay player. He has a chance to be an elite level player as a college guy, and that's probably why I would pick him if I were picking 1-1 tomorrow, and why we had him number one on our board. Bobby Witt is I don't mean to give him short shrift. He's a very special player who's got a ton of tools across the board at shortstop with plus makeup. The kid just loves to play. So he's the kind of guy I think fans would love, but it may just take him a tiny bit longer because he's a high schooler. The hit tool isn't quite as good as, say, Rutschman or Vaughn's. So if you're willing to be patient, the payoff would be huge. They have the benefit of having a really good college player there for them to take if they want.
Is there an argument against a catcher because there have been so few catchers taken 1-1? I think Joe Mauer may have been the last one, if I'm right.
Yep.
And they're only going to play 125 or 30 games. The shortstop obviously could start every night. A catcher's going to rest sometimes. Does that factor in any of this?
It wouldn't for me. I'm sure they'll take that into consideration. The impact a catcher has beyond just the games he starts behind the plate can be huge in terms, especially if, presuming they're going to have a really young pitching staff, you're going to want a catcher to shepherd those pitchers. As he gets established and becomes more of a veteran, that's going to happen more and more. You look at Buster Posey's impact in San Francisco, for instance. Was Buster Posey catching 150 games? No, but his impact on that team was tremendous. And in the American League, you could always get that bat into the lineup as a designated hitter from time to time. So I'm sure that gets thrown into the hopper as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with any of those picks. And we don't know what's going to happen in the spring if a guy separates himself more or regresses more. We'll have to see what happens. There are plenty of high school shortstops who have gone 1-1, some of whom have become great players and some of whom have become just okay players. So,
Right.
I think there are pros and cons you can find to any kind of pick that high.
And 1-1 is a great pick to have, but a track record tells us it doesn't guarantee anything, does it?
No, it doesn't. There are plenty of guys that miss. And I think more importantly, yes, you want to get that pick right for the optics of it, especially, again, new management coming in is really important. But they also have a larger draft pool as a result of picking 1-1. And it's how you use that whole pool and be successful. Because one of the things the Astros did, they missed on a bunch of their 1-1 picks. They actually have not done as well. I mean, Mark Appel didn't make it to the big leagues. Brady Aiken they didn't sign, but they did the year after Brady Aiken get Alex Bregman and Kyle Tucker in the same draft, and then some other really good players that they've, Lance McCullers Jr., in the same year that they took Carlos Correa 1-1. So it's how they used the pool as a whole because of the larger amount of money they have to play with. That's going to be an important factor to consider.
Exactly, and I want to ask you about that. We're talking with Jonathan Mayo from MLBpipeline.com here on MASN All Access. It looks like we can project out $8.4 million, somewhere in there will be the slot amount for the #1 pick. When Elias was in Houston, and you know this, of course, well, Correa led to McCullers. It looked like they saved a little on Correa and gave McCullers over slot. and made 2 good picks. Is that something, a scenario that could play out with this 1-1?
Yeah, absolutely. There's yet to be a player taking 1-1 who's gotten that full bonus pick value. So even if, say, a guy needs $7 million to sign, which is extraordinary, that's still an extra $1.5 million to play with later on. So you can get him at colors. They got Rio Ruiz in that draft as well, who they then used in a trade to help the big league team out with the Braves. So there's so many ways that you can construct a farm system and then the big league roster. And I think one of the vast amount of experience that Mike had with Houston is exactly how to do that. And I think they're going to have to be creative. There's no question that they will have the ability to do that because of how big the bonus pick value is for that top pick.
Well, it's going to be exciting, and it's only the second time in the history of the Baltimore Orioles they've had the first pick in the draft. Ben McDonald did okay, had some injuries, but he did okay, so we'll see how it's going to work out next June. But, Jonathan, we love the coverage you and Jim and others over there provide at MLB.com, MLBpipeline.com. Check him out, and thank you so much for taking time with us today.
Anytime.
Great to be with Jonathan Mayo here at the Winter Meetings in Las Vegas on MASN All Access.